Blood Knife began explaining the weaknesses of the animals using a massive skeleton over 2 meters high as a reference. No matter the animal, their hides are usually very tough. While bone knives are sharp, they can easily break. The best area to attack is the abdomen, which is not protected by bones and can be pierced with moderate force. Next, aim for the limbs to effectively reduce their attack speed and frequency. With a sinister smile, Blood Knife continued, of course, you can also try to attack the eyes, nose, and mouth. If successful, these can cause significant damage, but they are small targets and hard to hit. That's why I said judgment is crucial. However, remember to avoid attacking the back or the head's bony areas whenever possible. The bones there are too hard, and attacking with a bone knife would only break the knife without harming the animal. Lu Xinrui asked curiously, then why not use other weapons? Because we have no other options. The weapons we can use now are either made of bone, which is sharp but fragile, or stone, which is heavy and not easy to carry. Even within the hunting team, few people use stone weapons due to their weight. Lu Xinrui did not voice the obvious question about iron tools. Iron and steel tools from the old civilization wouldn't have survived the ages, and even so-called stainless steel isn't truly rust-proof, only rust-resistant. If they wanted to use iron tools, they would have to forge them themselves. Leaving aside whether anyone among them knew how to smelt iron or forge tools, the basic materials like iron or posed a challenge. Modern people, unless they worked in relevant fields, would struggle to identify ores. Lu Xinrui certainly couldn't tell one stone from another. Even if they identified the ore, how would they mine it? And after mining, how would they extract usable metal from the ore? This isn't something that can be done with simple fire, it's a complex process. Even if all these problems were solved, they didn't have enough manpower for mining, smelting, and forging. If possible, you should carry several bone knives, Blood Knife advised, they aren't very durable. Lu Xinrui nodded and asked, how do you make these bone knives? Without saying a word, Blood Knife picked up a heavy stone from the riverbank and took a dried thigh bone from the largest pile of bones, then began smashing the bone with the stone. After several repetitions, the bone was shattered into pieces. He selected a few fragments of suitable shape and handed them to Lu Xinrui. Just wrap one end with a cloth strip to use as a handle. The sharpness of the bone knives came not from their thickness but from the jagged edges formed when they were broken. Lu Xinrui carefully took the crude weapons. Seeing her cautiousness, Blood Knife suggested, let's head back to the camp and finish these. Then we'll start formal combat training. They retraced their steps to the camp, and Lu Xinrui placed the crude bone fragments in her and Yanzi's treehouse. As she was about to follow Blood Knife for training, they encountered a returning foraging team at the camp entrance. This team consisted of 5 men, 2 of whom looked pale and were being carried by the others, with one additional man looking anxious. The baskets they carried were nowhere to be seen. Although Lu Xinrui didn't know their names, she had seen them at the foraging team gatherings. The 2 men carrying their sick comrades were visibly exhausted and stopped to rest at the camp entrance, placing their comrades on the ground. One of the men, seeing Blood Knife and Lu Xinrui, hesitated briefly before calling for help. Hey, brother from the hunting team, please help us carry them to the doctor. They seem to have eaten something bad. The 2 carriers were already worn out, and even though it was a short distance to the camp, they were clearly unable to go further. Blood Knife hesitated but then stepped forward to carry one of the sick men, and along with the other rescuer, headed to the doctor's treehouse. Let's go. Lu Xinrui followed Blood Knife and the rescuer to the doctor's treehouse. Seeing their condition, the doctor immediately understood the seriousness. He laid the 2 men on the ground and, after questioning the rescuer, decisively sent Blood Knife to fetch the leader and the merchant. Xinrui, help him hold them down. Though the doctor had no modern medicines, he was familiar with treating food poisoning. He mixed prepared charcoal powder into water and, with Lu Xinrui and the rescuer's help, forced the charcoal water down the 2 men's throats. He then used his left hand to pinch their jaws and his right hand to induce vomiting, quickly making them vomit out the charcoal water and undigested food. The treehouse filled with a sour stench, but the doctor seemed unaffected, continuing to induce vomiting repeatedly. During this time, the leader, the merchant, and the remaining 2 foraging team members arrived. Lu Xinrui soon understood why the doctor was so agitated and summoned so many people. Since 2 people showed symptoms, This was likely not just food poisoning but a foodborne illness affecting shared food supplies. Other members might also develop symptoms. The leader, with a grave expression, questioned the other 3 foraging members about what they had eaten, instructing the merchant to check their recent food supplies to identify the culprit. The tense atmosphere in the treehouse continued. Despite the doctor's repeated efforts, his face grew more severe. Lucien Rui knew why. Inducing vomiting was almost the doctor's only available method, but the fact that symptoms had already manifested meant a significant amount of toxin had entered their bodies, which the doctor couldn't neutralize. Moreover, their symptoms were severe. Their faces were unnaturally flushed, and they seemed ready to vomit even bile. They were semi-conscious, muttering incoherently, their muscles slack, and their eyelids swollen. Lucien Rui felt utterly powerless. She looked up at the doctor, realizing that he had been enduring such feelings of helplessness all along. Meanwhile, the leader's questioning yielded no results. Although no third person had shown symptoms, the contaminated food remained unidentified. During this time, Eagle Eye returned from a foraging trip and joined the investigation. According to the 3 foragers, they hadn't eaten anything this afternoon, and their lunch was a shared meal, which should have been safe. Hearing the leader begin to question their food from the morning or even the previous day, Lucien Rui couldn't help but interject. "Leader, their symptoms clearly indicate a neurotoxin, which acts quickly, typically causing symptoms shortly after ingestion." The leader paused. "You know about this?" "Yes," Lucien Rui hesitated but then approached to check the 2 men's eyes. "Though I don't know the exact toxin, their symptoms are typical of a potent neurotoxin: unconsciousness, slurred speech, muscle relaxation, dilated pupils, flushed skin, rapid breathing. Soon their respiratory and cardiac muscles will begin to paralyze, leading to slowed breathing and heart rate until they stop completely. This means the toxic food was likely consumed around noon." Her grandfather's herbal shop had various toxic substances, and to prevent a young Lucien Rui from accidentally ingesting them, he had taught her how to recognize toxic herbs and the symptoms of poisoning. Although Lucien Rui knew little about traditional medicine, she had learned to recognize poisoning symptoms through years of exposure. The current symptoms of these 2 men were clearly signs of severe poisoning. The room fell silent. While the others lacked her ability to diagnose the exact toxin, they knew neurotoxins were deadly and had no antidote in their current situation. The leader, speaking with gravity, ordered, "Continue the investigation. We must identify the source of the poisoning." The merchant nodded and left to conduct a thorough search. Although no other cases had appeared, finding the contaminated food was essential to prevent further incidents.